Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor-in-chief at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how you doing today, sir?
I'm all good, mate. We had a very entertaining week of fights. Fight week itself was really quite interesting for UFC 291. We obviously had Spence and Crawford as well. So we've had sort of two main events, two massive fights, and two really, really good performances. And especially, in the UFC, excuse me, in the UFC, there was controversy, decisions, a hell of a lot of finishes up and down the card. So I'm looking forward to jumping straight into it. And, the fallout of UFC 291 is going to be really, really interesting as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it was a really fun card. I think this really delivered what the UFC was trying to do. Justin Gaethje knocks out Dustin Poirier with a head kick, gaining the BMF title, the second in history. And it was a good fight. It was a really fun clash. I think there was clear moments where Dustin Poirier seemed to be putting it all together, and Justin Gaethje just didn't give him the time of day to really mount any offense. He was interrupting combinations and pushing back, especially in the first round, landing tons of kicks to interrupt everything that was going on here. Justin Gaethje, honestly, as much as we have talked about, kind of touted like the damage that he has accumulated in his career can't last forever, he honestly just keeps getting better and better. He gets more tactical, he's more intelligent, and it all showed in this fight. Defeating a person that he struggled with and lost to in the past, this time he beat, and honestly, if they fight again, I would pick Justin. What were your impressions of the fight and the BMF title and all that?
Yeah, I mean, the BMF title is what it is. It's a gimmick bout. It doesn't mean that... I mean, look, Jorge Masvidal had it, and he then went on to lose multiple fights after that. It's a bit of fun. The UFC feel that they almost need to put a belt on every single pay-per-view at the top of the pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. That you don't have to do that. But the BMF bout aside, the performance from Justin Gaethje, I completely agree. If they fought for a third time, which there's a good chance that they will.
Absolutely.
I'd struggle to pick Dustin Poirier, because how do you make the adjustments when your opponent is just getting that much better? I don't think it's a case of, Father Time's caught up with Dustin Poirier. I really don't think that's the case, because, we saw how good he looked against Michael Chandler last time out. We saw how good he looked against Conor twice.
Yep.
But what's interesting is no one does that to Dustin Poirier. Yes, he's been knocked out before, but not in the manner in which he was knocked out this time. This was a well set. I mean, Dustin even came out and said it himself. This is a well set up head kick, a well set up finish. We look at his sort of TKO or KO finishes. Conor McGregor the first time, that wasn't really set up from Conor. It was just Conor forward momentum. Dustin kind of crumbled under the pressure of what back then was the Conor McGregor train. Look at the Michael Johnson knockout. That was kind of more of a flash knockout. That was more of a angry, getting caught in an exchange and being knocked out. No disrespect to Michael Johnson, because it's a really good finish, but I'm not quite sure how, tactically set up that finish was. With Justin Gaethje, this was a massive tactical setup. He threw the high kick, I think twice in the first round, of which none he tried to hide behind. It was just almost like a blind kick. It was just stood opposite your opponent, the leg comes up, high kick. Okay, fairly at that level. This is the elite level. Let's not forget, this is the elite level. That's quite easy to sort of read and register and block. When Justin Gaethje then threw the right hand with the leg coming around, by the time that the right hand would have landed, the leg was already way up off the floor and sort of in a way ready to land. And if I'm Dustin Poirier, that's slightly worrying, because he is. Let's not forget, Dustin Poirier is it's the elite level. He's had 38 fights, 29 wins, 8 losses, and that no contest against Eddie Alvarez back in the day. But this is the first time that we've really seen him sort of just outclassed in there, really. Yes, he's lost fights before. Yes, he's lost to Khabib, he lost to Charles Oliveira, but in this one against Justin Gaethje, that first round was really good. But I think that was just Justin Gaethje setting things up. And like you said, constant kicks to throw Dustin off his rhythm must have been so frustrating as well. You want to reset, or you want to at least set something up, and bang, you're getting your leg kicked, so you have to reset again. And okay, there's a high kick there. And I think, I wrote a piece in the week about 3 scenarios: either Justin Gaethje by knockout, Dustin Poirier by knockout, or a Dustin Poirier decision. I didn't see Gaethje winning by decision. But what I did say is that it all depends what Gaethje turns up. We could have the old Justin Gaethje, the one that turned up against Michael Johnson and Eddie Alvarez and Michael Chandler, or we could have the new Justin Gaethje, the one that turned up against when he went on that 3-fight run of James Vick, Edson Barboza, Donald Cerrone, and then we saw it a bit in the Fiziev fight last time out, where he's a little bit more reserved. He still has that in him to stand in the pocket and swing, but he's a little bit more reserved. He's a little bit more calculated, and I think that's the Justin Gaethje we got. And I mean, the win speaks for itself. It clearly works.
That head kick was just tremendous. Like, it was the way it was set up, the way it was brought in earlier, the way no one saw it coming as well. It was kind of almost tucked behind, and it was partially blocked, and it just didn't matter at all. Absolutely brilliant work. You love to see it. There hasn't been that many head kick knockouts in UFC main events in history, and this adds to it. This is like number 5 or something like that.
I read that stat this morning. This is number 5, and that is to me that is absolutely shocking. I cannot. It just seems like we see them so often, but obviously it must be in co-main events and fight night main events and whatnot. Obviously, the 4 previously, I believe, GSP, Matt Hughes, Anderson, Vitor,
good luck. And then
Ali Holm, Ronda Rousey, and of course, in the exact same arena, our own Rocky Edwards. But this is only the 5th head kick knockout in a main event. No, I'm trying to think. Anderson Silva versus Randy Couture.
I think you're thinking of something else here. What do you think? What do you think you're thinking of?
No, I'm definitely not thinking of that. No, I'm thinking of Lyoto Machida versus Vitor Belfort. Randy
Lyoto Randy.
Yeah, Lyoto Randy, because it was the Anderson Silva kick.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fight that I'd still watch today. Randy Couture versus Anderson Silva. Here we are. But,
at their age, that's fine. That's a fair fight.
But only the 5th head kick knockout in UFC main event history, and surprisingly, it's very similar to the 4th in Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman. Does this mean that Dustin Poirier is done? Absolutely not. I think Dustin Poirier could. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was still the favorite going into a trilogy fight. He's the favorite going into this one. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still the favorite going into the trilogy fight. What does make me a little bit concerned is that Dustin Poirier hasn't always been that brawler, that fighter, that guy that goes in there and puts it all on the line, takes 10 to land 10. He sort of evolved into that later on in his career. For me, it's kind of since the Max Holloway, the Justin Gaethje first fight, that fight with Justin Gaethje, I think he kind of played up to Justin Gaethje, as it were. Then he went in there against Eddie Alvarez. Then he went in there against Max Holloway, Dan Hooker. That Michael Chandler fight was a war. But if you look back at his earlier career when he was at featherweight, you've got really good wins against the likes of Akira Kurosani, Diego Brandao, Eric Koch, Yancy Medeiros. These weren't sort of like brutal wars. And it just makes me wonder, we saw that excellent quote saying, look, there's no bad blood between the two guys, but we saw that excellent quote from Poirier, we'll kind of share a beer in the hospital kind of vibe, which is, did he play up to we've got to go out there and put on a show? Because, the pay-per-view, you'd already got your money's worth by the time the main event happened, and then you have the main event. So, you don't have to go out there and put on a phenomenal performance in a fight of the night winning effort. But I did Dustin play up to the kind of hype of the fight itself? I'm not so sure. He didn't do that against Conor McGregor. He didn't exchange with Conor McGregor because he was just a slicker boxer in there. He was better fighter. So it makes me wonder why he did that against Justin Gaethje, a man that arguably hits harder and is more sort of battle ready, as it were, than McGregor.
Yeah, I wonder if he was just getting set in the ways a little bit. Like, he just beat Conor McGregor twice. He was doing fine against Charles Oliveira at the moment it was working. He was beating Michael Chandler. I wonder if, it's one of those, I have my game. I'm going to do my game regardless of what happens. And that's almost why Justin Gaethje was able to make this fight work for him, is because maybe Dustin wasn't making the adjustments as the fight was going on, because, he's the favorite going in. Arguably, he probably has better wins career-wise. He has more dominant wins against more important opponents like Max Holloway and Conor McGregor and these kind of people. people. But yeah, I wonder if Dustin was just like, I know my game works against this guy. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to make adjustments. And that's why it worked out so well for Justin, who did make the better adjustments, who really just like, as much as we think of him as a caveman hitting stones together, he really has grown into a Renaissance man at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think,
God, I'm funny. How do people handle this? I'm so funny.
No, exactly. It's he came to the UFC with a lot of hype from World Series of Fighting, where he was knocking guys out with leg kicks. He was undefeated at 18-0 or 15-0 or something like that. He was the WSOF champion. So he was 17-0 when he joined the UFC, coming off the back of 4 straight knockouts. 2 of which came via leg kicks. You've got just a multitude of knockouts prior to the UFC. I mean, his debut was against UFC veteran Kevin Krohn, and he won via slam. On your debut, you win via slam. He's got punch knockouts, rear naked chokes, leg kicks, elbows, knees. Like he was, and still is, a very fun fighter. Then he has that fight of the year, fight of the night, fight of the headline fight against Michael Johnson, which really put him on the map. Then he had that war against Eddie Alvarez and lost. He had the war against Dustin Poirier and lost. And then he scaled it back a bit.
Yep.
And then he had the phenomenal performance against Tony Ferguson, where, again, scaled back, just a dominant performance. And we saw even when he sort of drifted into that caveman kind of fight style, as it were, he got dropped by Tony Ferguson. And then he went into the Khabib fight and was still a little bit more reserved, but just that's Khabib is Khabib. Defeats Michael Chandler in the caveman style, goes into the Charles Oliveira fight in the caveman style and loses. Now he returns against Rafael Fiziev, a guy who, I mean, you've got to mind your P's and Q's against Fiziev, because
he's good.
If you make one mistake, he's maybe the best striker in the lightweight division. It's lights out night. So he sort of scaled it back, and he scaled it back again against Dustin Poirier. And for me, Justin Gaethje is next for the title, regardless of whether it's Charles Oliveira or Islam Makhachev. After October, he's next for the proper lightweight title. BMF is what it is. We can build that for a bit.
Yeah.
He is next for the lightweight title. And after a performance like that, it would be hard to pick against whoever the champion is, which is an ironic thing to say. I know Charles has already beat him, but if you scale Justin back against Charles for a second time, how does that one play out? Islam Makhachev, we've seen Justin Gaethje's defensive wrestling, and he's far better than Makhachev on the feet. It makes for a very entertaining fight.
Yeah, it's the small improvements, but it's the tactical adjustments as the fight is going on. The tactical adjustments that he's able to follow game plans in camp and then apply it during the fight. That's the kind of stuff that really separates very good brawlers into tactical geniuses and champions in the fight. Honestly, the book is not written on Justin Gaethje at this point, and he exceeded my expectations, because I was like, yeah, Dustin Poirier probably wins this pretty easily. Honestly, as long as he doesn't get his leg kicks. Man, honestly, those weren't that big of a factor. And but yeah, let's take a look at the light heavyweight showdown between Alex Pereira defeating former champion Jan Blachowicz. This is probably a surprise to both of us, because both of us picked Jan. I'll say, if you like, thing is with Alex Pereira, former Glory middleweight, 2-division champion in kickboxing, former UFC middleweight champion and all that. He is not going to be competing in ADCC, and he's not going to be competing in any wrestling competitions around the globe, but he doesn't need to. He just needs to show basically what we saw in this fight, a wall walk here and there. He was defending takedowns. He defended a submission against a veteran. What more do you want out of him? Now he's primed to probably fight for the title against Yuri Prochazka. What did you make of the fight, Frazer?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And if you look down the division, there's no, elite wrestlers that are going to really give him, you got Magomed Ankalaev.
Yeah. That's a tough one for him. That's no doubt a tough one. But other than that,
you got Yuri, you got Jan Blachowicz, who he's just dealt with fairly comfortably on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Rakic. I mean, Nikita Krylov's a good sort of ground guy, but
probably submits him, yeah, honestly.
Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, Volkan Ozdemir, Ryan Spann. None of these are elite wrestlers. So I think he and it's the same with the middleweight division. If obviously we know he's not going to drop back down, but Tricus du Plessis, Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori, Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa, Derek Brunson's probably got the best chance of taking him down, and that fight's never going to happen. He was lucky in a way that, and I know the whole narrative between him and Adesanya is why he took that and went down to middleweight to beat Adesanya again and blah, 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 blah. But if Adesanya had an elite wrestling game, Alex Pereira was never named middleweight champion, in my opinion.
No, never.
And as we saw in this one, we thought that Jan Blachowicz would shoot for the takedown, and he shot for that takedown within the first 5 seconds of the fight. They stood opposite each other, and then he drove into the fence, and he dominated that first round. For me, it's not a 10-8. The damage wasn't really done for me to warrant a 10-8. There were a couple of potential fight-ending scenarios, but those rear naked chokes were never too far in, as it were. They weren't sort of worrying Alex Pereira after, clearly, because he was in one after the other, after the other, after the other. And like you say, you're not going to see him on the upcoming, submission underground. You're not going to see him on Polaris. You're not going to see him at ADCC. But like Adesanya, and you've got to make the comparisons because they are pretty much the same fighter. He did what Adesanya couldn't do, and it was get back to his feet constantly against Jan Blachowicz. Got back to his feet, get back to his feet, get back to his feet. He used, like you say, the wall walk to get back to his feet. And at the end of the day, it was a close fight, but I think Jan Blachowicz just gassed out. I don't know why in that second and third round he didn't look to just make it a boring. There's no denying that first round he won. There's no question that Alex Pereira won that. I know the second 2 rounds are contentious, but there's no denying that he won that first round. Sorry, but I think it was just the altitude in Salt Lake City that got to him. We saw it get to Leon Edwards when he fought there last year. We saw it get to Paulo Costa and Luke Rockhold. I'm pretty sure both of those men are still tired.
Yeah.
And I think we saw it get to, Alex Pereira, but I think we also really saw it get to Jan Blachowicz, which, he wasn't able to get the fight to the ground with any great success in the second and third rounds. When he did get the fight to the ground, I think he got a takedown in each of those rounds, but it was just a change of position. He didn't do anything with it. He didn't dominate. He didn't look to land ground pound. He didn't look to lock in a rear naked choke. And I think deep down, and the UFC don't have favourites, let's not remember that, but a Jiří Procházka versus Alex Pereira fight is a far more entertaining fight than a Jiří Procházka versus Jan Blachowicz fight. And I think the UFC with the cameras off, with the microphones turned off, I think Dana White probably looks at John Anik and Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard and says, we've got a good one lined up here, guys. I'm happy with that result.
I think the most important, so like you were saying, we'll talk about the control. Like control isn't that big of a deal, that even in those rounds where he was having minutes of control, Jan Blachowicz, he didn't outland Alex Pereira. And we are just looking at damage at this point. And in 5 years, judging might be something else. 5 years ago, judging was something else. But as of right now, we are just looking at damage. Really good shot selection and accuracy from Alex Pereira, keeping his cardio hot for the entire round, controlling the center. Just really good stuff that you like to see. Now he's set up to fight Jiří Procházka. And like you said, it's a banger of a fight. I could see Jiří winning this one by spinning back elbow, or he just spins at the wrong time and ducks right into a left hook. Like, this could go either way. But I think what the UFC needs to do at this point is get Alex Pereira needs to tell his story, because he has a really good story of being a former alcoholic in a dead-end job, working in a tire shop in Brazil. Fighting helped him get over alcohol, and then somehow he becomes a 2-division kickboxing champion. Now he's primed to be a 2-division UFC champion. Like, it's so rare. Like, his name might be a lot.
Any of that, and I didn't know any of this stuff.
That's the thing. Like, he's got such a good story. He has like a Francis Ngannou story, and the UFC has not communicated it very well. And now his name potentially will be alongside that of Daniel Cormier and Conor McGregor and greats like this. Alex Pereira, not Israel Adesanya, will be potentially one of those guys. Like, what? This is so cool, right?
Exactly, and that's the thing. That the first fight with Israel Adesanya was the whole Alex Pereira's beaten him twice. He's knocked him out. He's beaten him by decision. This is the story of their kickboxing days. It's a story of their kickboxing days. Oh, and then the second fight was, now it's 3-0. He's knocked him out. He's the first guy to ever knock Adesanya out. Has he just got Adesanya's number? Blah, 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 blah. And now this fight, I don't feel was really big enough to really tell the story of Alex Pereira. Realistically, you know, Jan Blachowicz, he's not a massive ticket seller. He's a great fighter, but he's just not a big ticket selling sort of guy. He's not a big pay-per-view draw. No. That's why the fight this time didn't really make sense to tell that story. But we're looking at a guy who in 11 professional MMA bouts, and yes, he's had a storied career in kickboxing, but could be a 2-weight world champion, having headlined, I mean, it's definitely a headliner, him versus you, having headlined 3 pay-per-views.
Yeah.
He's 8-2 at the moment, with his only other loss coming, I think, was it his first fight, or it was I mean, it was early on in his career, Alex Pereira, that he lost that. So, yeah, he lost his first fight in 2015. And then, obviously, he lost to Adesanya, not last time out, but the time before in April. And, you know, I questioned on the show last week, was it too early a turnaround for him? You know, he knocked out pretty brutally in April. Was it too early a turnaround? But it wasn't. He looked really good. Did his shots look a little bit laboured? Yes. Was he a little bit slow? Yes. But let's not forget, it's the first time fighting up at 205 in a long time. And it's also that altitude that's got to have, you know, really played a part.
Yeah, I co-sign with you. So let's do 2-division champion history. Can you name? There has been, in UFC history, there has been 8 2-division champions in its history. Can you name them all? We already threw out 2. Can you name them all, Fraser?
So we got Amanda Nunes.
Yeah.
DC and Connor.
Good.
John Jones.
Perfect.
GSP.
Nice.
BJ.
Yeah, good job.
And how many more?
You're missing 2.
It's not a CM Punk.
It was close, though.
Similar fight style there.
You're going to be kicking yourself on both.
I am. Matt Hughes?
No.
No, of course not. Old guard or new guard? Sort of older.
Well, one of each in this case.
New guard. I'm trying to think who's had 2 belts wrapped around their shoulders.
I'll give you the old one. He gained it. You mentioned him earlier in the show, getting knocked out by Lyoto.
Randy.
Of course. And then the new one, and you'd be kicking yourself. You're gonna feel so stupid. He was an Olympian.
Oh, technically triple C.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, see, it's the wrestlers to me. I can't get the wrestlers. I got DC and I was all out of wrestlers.
Yeah. But that's the thing of, like, these are people that we talk about being all-time greats. Their legacies are absolutely incredible. And then Alex Pereira, what a career this man has had. But let's go down the card here. I do want to talk, we will do Derek Lewis and the other ones, but I really do want to do Bobby Green and Tony Ferguson, because Tony Ferguson isn't showing shades of how we used to know him. He isn't showing moments of brilliance. He's winning fights. He is winning, straight up winning these fights against Michael Chandler. He was beating Bobby Green. It is, I feel absolutely terrible about Tony Ferguson losing now like 6 or 7 in a row. His career couldn't be worse luck in terms of every Khabib fight that was canceled on him. Like these main events that he was brought into and then they were canceled at the last minute. The fight was never made 5 times. And then these fights, on just if a different roll of the dice, he would have beaten Michael Chandler. A different roll of the dice, he would have beaten Bobby Green. And certainly it's not just luck, you know, he was really damaging himself in the training room, really damaged himself in the fights when he didn't need to be doing that. But geez, I don't know what's next for him, because he's older than he ever was. He's losing. He's still, I'm in between of like, he looks awful and he looks okay. And I don't know what the right answer is, right?
For sure. And, you know, it's like you say, it's so disappointing. He went on one of the most legendary runs in UFC history. If you look at some of the names that on that run from, you know, after he lost to Michael Johnson, some of the names on the Abel Trio, Danny Castillo, Clayton Tebow, Josh Thompson, Edson Barboza in that bloody fight.
Those are really good fights. Yeah.
RDA, Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, and then the losing streak started. And at the end, the difficult thing is he's not just losing by dominant decision like he did against Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush. His last 3 fights, he's been finished. Michael Chandler, brutal front kick. Nate Diaz, guillotine choke. And now Bobby Green, an arm triangle. Now, to be honest,
That's a rough one.
no disrespect to Bobby Green, but he's a boxer, and he'll be the first one to tell you that he's a boxer.
Yeah.
You don't lose by arm triangle to Bobby Green. And this is the kind of area that we thought he might cause could be problems, where on the floor he had that Eddie Bravo 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu style that could potentially, of course, cause some issues. But now, like I say, he's being finished by Bobby Green via arm triangle choke. He's being finished by Nate Diaz by guillotine choke. Being finished by Michael Chandler, finished by Justin Gaethje. And if you even, he was always the output guy. His fight against Anthony Pettis, 114 strikes landed to 45. His fight against Donald Cerrone, 104 strikes landed to 68. Against RDA in the main event, 199 strikes landed. Josh Thompson, 83 strikes landed. Going back as far as, his first UFC fight against Ramsey Nijem straight off the tough, 21-12. Aaron Riley, 31-11. Eve Edwards, 61-45. Now you look at this, you look down his more recent fights on his losing streak. Outlanded by Justin Gaethje, outlanded by Charles Oliveira, outlanded by Beneil Dariush, outlanded in that fight against Michael Chandler, outlanded against Nate Diaz. And then this is the worrying one, against Bobby Green. Bobby Green landed 145 total strikes to Tony Ferguson's 62. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there when you said he damaged himself in training camp and hasn't really ever been able to bounce back from it because, his training is legendary. It's probably in hindsight legendary for all the wrong reasons. We saw, kicking steel bars and these crazy balancing on exercise balls in order to.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know why. I was going to say I don't know why, but he's balancing on exercise balls. He's constantly, working on his movement using a tennis ball or a baseball, and he's just unconventional methods of training, which worked for the longest time, but it's clearly led to a number of injuries. I think the biggest fight between him and Khabib, he had to pull out of that fight due to when he tripped over the wire and blew his knee out. Now you're an elite athlete who's supposed to be stepping in there in 5 or 6 days. I'm pretty sure that was I can't remember what card that was. Was that the New York card, the famous Dolly incident card?
Yes, I think that was all in a row, and what a freak show that was. That weekend was insane.
Where Max Holloway stepped in, but he.
Oh yeah, and then they got. Yeah,
and then you had Anthony Pettis weighed
what's the
in.
rumor? Yeah,
but then also Paul Felder weighed in, but he weighed in at 156 with his boxer shorts on, and then Aya Quinter came in and all of that shit. But going back to the original fight was Tony Ferguson versus Khabib, and Tony blew his knee out tripping over a wire. I think this unconventional, batshit crazy training regime is it's kind of come around to bite him on the ass a little bit. As we can see, again, with the greatest respect to Bobby Green, Tony Ferguson should be wiping the floor with him. If you look at the losses that Bobby Green's got on his record, lost to Drew Dober, Islam Makhachev, Fiziev, Thiago Moises, Trinaldo, Drakkar Klose, Barboza, Poirier, Rashid Magomed. You're looking at guys that they're never going to compete for a belt, aside from Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. But where Bobby Green is in his career at the moment, and where Tony Ferguson is and has been in his career, this kind of outcome shouldn't have happened. And yet it happened. It happened in pretty dominant fashion. I think Tony was on his way to losing a decision anyway, but then to get finished and to be on his way to losing a decision where he hasn't just been out-wrestled like he was against Oliveira and Dariush, where he was thoroughly dominated in all areas of the fight, is someone's got to put their arm around Tony and say, look, we've got one more in us. Ask him, have you got one more in you? Realistically, have you got one more in you? If you have, we'll contact the UFC and we'll give you an easy gimmick, winnable fight, and you'll put your gloves down in the octagon. Or if he hasn't, he hasn't. It is what it is. But it can't keep going on like this because he's taking damage in these fights as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult, and it's difficult to see, but it's disappointing at the same time.
Yeah. I think if you do say this is my retirement fight, I'm willing to walk off in the sunset. The UFC has done for people in the past, given them a very easy fight. Like Shogun's last fight was like an 0-1 kind of guy, and sadly struggled. But yeah, if Tony does say that, they'll find some guy, some guy with a losing record or something like that. But yeah, I don't know what's next for him. And look, with his name, with his credentials, he can still do instructionals. He can still do submission grappling. He can still do lots of coaching. He is a specialist on the mat. Yeah, it's good to see. Anyway, let's go down to Priscilla Cachoeira. She's got to be cut from the UFC and MMA at this point. She may be, even in the highlights where we're trying to enjoy the work from Miranda Maverick, you can see multiple fouls going on within a 10-second period, just in this fight alone. She was doing oil checks. She was trying to take her opponent's top off. She was trying to do the secret tap. It's just absolutely ridiculous stuff. And then the eye gouging in the past. Enough's enough. This is ridiculous, all right?
Yeah. Yeah. Against Gillian Robertson, she was near on knuckle deep in Gillian Robertson's eye whilst Gillian was choking her out. And as you said, multiple fouls in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just... I don't know what she hopes to, I don't know what she hopes to gain. If she wins the fight, well done, you won because you kind of cheated. If you lose the fight, you're now being outed like we are now for someone that isn't good enough and was cheating to try and make themselves up to the level of their opponent.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's kind of taken away a little bit from the victory that Miranda Maverick
amazing armbar.
Cheated last month. Remember,
yeah.
She lost to Jasdavicius. We should be talking about how good Miranda Maverick is, and yet we're talking about Priscilla Cachoeira. Just, let's not forget she was brought in on short notice to face Valentina Shevchenko, and she got thoroughly battered in that one.
Yep.
Again, total strikes 95-2. Let's just put that. It is what it is. And then lost to Molly McCann, and then she lost to Luana Carolina. That should have been it for her. 0-3 in the UFC. We've given you another 2 chances because you stepped in on short notice and sort of saved the card, as it were, for Valentina Shevchenko's flyweight debut. We appreciate all your hard work. Have a fight against Molly McCann in the UK. Okay, that was quite a tough fight for you. Molly McCann in the UK. We'll give you one more. If you don't win this one, see the door. Then she comes back and knocks out Shayna Dobson, and she knocks out Gina Mazzani. And they've kept her on because she's got this knockout power, But it's in a word, she just cheats. She's just, and it's like you say, if it's a one-off accidental eye poke, like we saw in the Tony Ferguson Bobby Green, these things happen. If it's a fence grab, it's instinct, bang, or fence grab. I'm going down, I'm just grabbing onto whatever I can to stop myself. And, we all do it. If someone's about to fall over, you just try and grab onto whatever it is. If it happens to be a fence there, you dig your fingers in and, these things happen. And a lot of the time you are warned about it and it's not an instant point takeaway because I think referees kind of accept a lot of the time that is just a simple reactional mistake, just to grab onto the fence. These things happen. The eye gouging, that's an active... You have to actively gouge someone's eyes. You have to sort of figure out where, especially from behind, you have to figure out where their face is, where their eyes sit, and actively not close your fist to punch.
Mm-hmm.
This is the difficulty with women's MMA is obviously they have to wear the extra layer of clothing that we've seen in the past with Jessica Andrade versus Erin Blanchfield. Sometimes does cause a little bit of an issue. But just get better at fighting if you're having to cheat to try and get the upper hand. Miranda Maverick quite possibly could be a UFC champion one day, but she's not so far ahead of Priscilla Cachoeira where she has to cheat to get on her level. There shouldn't be that big a gap in between the levels of these two women, and yet there clearly wasn't. Hence why Priscilla Cachoeira was just committing foul after foul after foul. And I never like to say that I'm glad that someone lost a fight, because that's not exactly fair. But in this situation, it's hard to not be. I'm pleased that Miranda Maverick won the fight. I'm not glad that Priscilla Cachoeira lost, but I'm pleased that Priscilla Cachoeira didn't get the win, because she didn't deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, and look forward to seeing what the future holds for Miranda Maverick. Just really impressive work, impressive improvements in between bouts. She's kind of a must-see TV. I always like tuning in to see her fight. Also on the card we had people like Kevin Holland, Gabriel Bonf, and of course Derek Lewis. What else do you want to point out on this card?
I wrote an article yesterday. Michael Chiesa staring down the barrel of retirement.
Yeah, that's a rough one, because he was out for a minute there. And then came back in a fight that was quite winnable for him, but
in a fight, like you say, that was quite winnable. In a fight where he held, what he's good at is what Kevin Holland is quote unquote bad at, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu game. And he was just thoroughly dominated from start to finish. And Kevin Holland said, "Look, as soon as I defended the takedown, I knew that I'd got the fight." And if I'm Chiesa, I'd probably hang them up. He's always said that. Well, he said on his Instagram that he's got one more in him, which I'm not mad about at all. That's fine. But when you're getting dominated by guys like Kevin Holland on the ground, it's a tough look. And he's always said as well that once I have no route back to the title, I'll hang them up. Well, I don't see him having a route to the title in any way, shape, or form at the moment. So it's probably time to hang them up. I don't like to tell anyone to retire, but you've got two guys on this card in Tony Ferguson and Michael Chiesa, where I don't think Michael Chiesa's legacy is too tarnished with the 3 losses, because you look at the guys that he's lost to: Sean Brady when he was on the come up, Vicente Luque, and now Kevin Holland. Mm-hmm. All at welterweight. You can kind of say that, look, I was a really good lightweight, I was a reasonable welterweight, but I just couldn't cross over. And it doesn't really tarnish his legacy at all.
Rough night. You doing all right, man?
Just a big weekend. That's the only thing. I had a stag do this weekend, and it's still only Tuesday, and it's still catching up with me, to be honest, mate.
That's right too. I forgot about that. I know you were telling me about that. But let's look at the week. Actually, did you want to say anything for Derek Lewis or anyone like that?
Just love Derek Lewis. It's more Derek Lewis content on my timeline, please. Big fly. A guy like that shouldn't be throwing anything that means that he's airborne, and yet he's throwing a flying knee, followed by brutal ground and pound, takes his pants off, DX chop, dancing around the octagon. Derek Lewis. All the Derek Lewis content, please.
Absolutely. All right, let's move forward. Looking forward to this week's card, and it's quite nice. UFC Sandhagen. We have UFC Fight Night, Cory Sandhagen versus Rob Font. That is a great fight right there. We also have Jessica Andrade versus Tatiana Suarez. Just these top 2 fights, these top 2 billings, so dang good. Absolutely love to see it here. What do you make of the card? Let's start with the main event, Cory Sandhagen versus Rob Font.
Yeah, of course. Rob Font stepping in on short notice. It was obviously meant to be Umar Nurmagomedov. That's a mouthful. It was meant to be Nurmagomedov. He's pulled out with that. I'm not sure if you saw the footage where his shoulder kind of popped out from. I don't know what happened. Nobody really knows what happened, but his shoulder kind of popped out as he threw a punch, and he kind of received a punch, I think, a counter, and his shoulder popped out. Very strange, but. Is this a more entertaining fight? It's a good argument. Rob Font coming off that big win against Adrian Yanez last time out. I am extremely keen to see how Rob Font looks, and I'm extremely keen to see how Cory Sandhagen looks. Obviously, he dropped the split decision to TJ Dillashaw, then he lost to Petr Yan. He's come back in the main event against Song Yadong. That doctor's stoppage due to that huge cut. He's then beat Marlon Vera earlier this year in the main event. I I think this will be played out on the feet, and I think it'll be two really slick boxers just having a fight. And I think both of these guys do just come to fight, and I'm really, really excited for it.
Yeah, no, yeah. Official pick, I think we can both safely say Cory Sandhagen should be the favorite coming in, is the favorite coming in. This guy's dropping razor close decisions to Pereira and TJ Dillashaw. Got backpacked by Aljamain Sterling, but no shame in any of that. I just feel like he's going to be a step or two ahead of Rob Font, right? Stop me when I'm wrong here.
No, exactly. I can't, because, I do think, especially because he's the one that's been preparing for the main event slot for slightly longer than Song Yadong, than Rob Font, sorry. Mm-hmm. I just think he's slightly more well-rounded. He's got those. He's not the best submission artist, but he's got really quick submissions. Is what I think. He doesn't hang about too long to lock in a submission. Mm-hmm. I really think that he's going to be looking to put himself in the shot window. With the bantamweight title fight being UFC 292,
whatever, something like that.
Boston. I don't know. It's in Boston. It's Sterling versus O'Malley. Whoever wins that, I think Cory Sandhagen with a big win here, very reasonably could be next. I know we've got Merab, but he looks like he might be clashing with Henry Cejudo as and when, if Cejudo is fit for. I think he popped his shoulder. What is it with these bantamweights popping their shoulders out? You got TJ Dillashaw, you got Nurmagomedov, you got Henry Cejudo, but. I think with a big win here, Cory Sandhagen should be saying, look, I'm next for the title. I'm going to be in Boston. I'll be the alternate. Hopefully I won't take any damage, and I'll be there, and I'll be the next contender for the bantamweight title, because he deserves it. It'll be hard, 3-fight winning streak. If he puts on a really good performance against Rob Font, it's not going to be easy. We saw Rob Font drop a couple of fights, but then we saw him return against Adrian Yanez in what was a backs against the wall fight for Rob Font, and he kind of exploded off that wall and put in a really good performance.
Yeah, I co-sign with you on all that. Tatiana Suarez is on the comeback trail after years away. She got one win since 2019 against Montana De La Rosa. That was, I believe, at flyweight. Now she's back at strawweight against the former champion Jessica Andrade. This is an immediate #1 contender fight if she's able to win, and the UFC knows it. I think if Tatiana is showing 80% of what she used to have in 2019 and beyond, I think this is a very good fight for Miss Suarez. I know there's lots of issues with her injuries and weight cutting and all this other stuff, but if she's even 80% as healthy as she once was, she can beat Jessica Andrade, right?
You'd think so. I know. I'm looking at the Andrade's record. She's so up and down. She's lost a lot. She won 3, then she lost 2 on the bounce. I even forgot that she got knocked out by Yan Xiaonan. I thought her last fight was Erin Blanchfield. This will be, it's commendable, but this is her 4th fight in 2023. Is she getting better in between fights? No. So just take some time off. You beat Lauren Murphy by the dominant decision in January. You then return on late notice against Erin Blanchfield in February. You then return against Yang Xiaonan in May. Now you return again against Tatiana Suarez in August. Massive opportunity for Suarez to kind of jump on the back of the poor run of form that Jessica Andrade is enjoying at the moment. And I agree with you. I think she gets the victory here.
Yeah, but again, I would love Jessica Andrade. Very much she is that must-see TV status. She is trying to knock everyone out. Any weight class that you put her in, she's trying to knock heads off. But yeah, I think Tatiana Suarez, there's a reason that we're all touting her to be a future champion, even 4 years on from an injury, 4 years on from struggling, things like this. Even with all that, she's a future champion in my mind. I don't know that there's anyone in this weight class who has the wrestling chops or counter ability to really stop her, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll really have to see a stand-up game in this one, because Jessica Andrade, she's not easy to take down. She is, she can be taken down, but she's not easy to be taken down. Mm-hmm. And she's got hands of stone as well. She's knocking girls out. She's one of the hardest hitting females that we've got on the roster.
Easily
1-punch knockout against Karolina Kovacevic. I think still scares me to this day. So you've got to think that she's going to at least test the chin of Tatiana Suarez once, and something that we haven't actually seen from Suarez, which makes it such an intriguing fight. I think if there's any fight on the card to really make sure that you sit down and watch intently, it's this one.
I agree with you on that. I don't think there's a ton else on that card. Tanner Bozer's back after complaining about pay. Ludovic Klein is on it. I mean, yeah, it's all right. There's a few other items here and there.
Jake Hadley's on there. Billy Q is always fun.
Yeah.
Sean Woodson's always got a pretty crazy fighting style. And Bahamundez, I think he scored my knockout of the year. I think, was it last year against Roosevelt?
Yeah.
Roberts? 2 years ago
against
Roosevelt Roberts. He's enjoying a 3-fight winning run. You've got wheel kick, Bravo choke, and then the decision last time out. But he's facing Ludovic Klein, who, Klein himself is on a good run of form. Devontae Smith win, Mason Jones win, Chai Herbert draw, and that was a draw in the UK. So I think that one's going to be a bit of a sleeper on the card. I can see it going to a decision, but I can see it being highly competitive all the same.
Should be a good one. We also have upcoming this weekend. It is going to be the PFL 7 2023 playoffs. We're getting into the semifinals. We'll quickly because it's quite a good fight card, but we'll quickly just shout out a couple of these ones that we'd like to see. Bubba Jenkins versus Jesus Pineda. We also have Joshua Silveira versus Ty Flores. Gabriel Barga, who I'm not overly familiar with, versus Chris Wade. But then we have Martin Hamlet versus Impa Kasaganai at light heavyweight. These are good fights, eh?
Exactly, and I don't think the PFL are doing an awfully good job of promoting what is a very good card.
I know.
I've seen bits and bobs from it. Like I've seen a bit, but God, this is a really good card. Like, it is. Like what? I'm not quite sure why the PFL aren't doing more to really sort of get it out there and say, look at this card that we're putting on. From top to bottom, you've got Chelsea Hackett on here as well. That she's 23 years old. Her last fight was in 2020 against Victoria Leonardo on the Contender Series. She didn't get the victory there. She's facing a girl she should beat, to be honest. But it is what it is. You've got really good fighters on this card. Impa Kasanganay versus Martin Hamlet is a really good fight. Kasanganay really finding himself at a light heavyweight. Obviously, he had the UFC run that didn't quite go his way. But since joining the PFL, he's 3-0 with 2 finishes, one by knockout and one by submission, and one by decision. So he quite literally can do it all.
Yeah. Chris
Wade has got the opportunity to the sort of strange goings on in this PFL division, where it was believed that they didn't sort of fight it wasn't in the best interest of the sport, should we say. So Chris Wade's got that extra opportunity. Josh Silveira versus Ty Flores. Expect a competitive fight because he's a good guy. The thing is, for the PFL, you haven't got this year a Kayla Harrison or a Brendan Loughnane in there to really sell tickets, to really, that they put a lot of money in the Aspen Ladd basket. Didn't really pay off for them. Julia Budd, I don't think it really paid off for them. Pacheco's going to win that tournament.
Oh, there's no doubt.
This one, at least, we've got, you've got Chris Wade in here. Like you said, you've got Bubba Jenkins. And against Jesus Pineda, who, let's not forget, he's the first guy to ever finish Brendan Loughnane. Loughnane's lost before, but I don't think he's never been finished. So, he's got legitimate power. Was it a lucky shot? Even Brendan Loughnane said it wasn't. It's just well set up. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to that. Next week we'll break it all down, and I think they need to do a little bit better promoting because we've given it more promotion than I've seen all week.
Honestly, it's really I agree with you that they really need to push this card because I looked at it and I thought this is really good stuff. Impa Kasanganay, like you were alluding to, very talented fighter. Very talented. However, unfortunately, was on the wrong end of one of the greatest knockouts in the sport's history, has immortalized him, but just a cool guy overall. Martin Hamlet, very highly skilled, very highly touted. Thad Gene is on it. I mean, there's a few other fights that are quite good. One Championship has a fight card this weekend as well, headlined by kickboxing and submission grappling, so I'm sure no one's going to watch it but me. Is there anything else I missed? Is there like a KSW or like an Octagon or anything else coming up that maybe I missed?
We've got something that I don't want to talk about before, so we won't talk about it this week, but we'll talk about it next week. Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz this weekend. I've got very little interest in breaking it down, but I've got quite an invested interest in breaking it down after the fact, if that makes sense. Now, I don't know what Nate Diaz is going to look like. I don't know if Nate Diaz is going to turn up, but I will watch the fight next week and we will break it down next week. But I can't allude to what the fight will look like purely because I don't have a clue. It'll be a spectacle. It'll be a spectacle. Let's just leave it at that. It'll be a spectacle, and we'll talk about it next week because I have no idea what this fight is going to be like.
I think we're going to be sad.
I have a horrible feeling.
I think Nate's going to trash talk because he's getting beat up so much. He's going to turn his back and walk away. I think he's going to complain, but I don't think Nate has a good path to victory in this one, right?
If he fights anything like I've seen him hit pads,
I know. I saw.
Not looking good. But stranger things have happened. Sort of.
Is what it is. But what a weird sport we cover here, right? Like last week we were talking about the 6-foot-tall goth girl, and I was more excited for her than I am for Nate and Jake Paul.
Exactly. But that's the thing. We've given you a breakdown and a preview, and now next week it's just we'll give you a breakdown and a preview. We've got Anthony Joshua to break down next week.
Yeah.
We've got Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, I guess we'll touch on. We've got PFL. We've got like we alluded to, a fun UFC card. So it's quite a packed week, and there's keep it locked to MMA Sucka because we've got plenty of content up on the site as well.
Links will be down below for everyone. Mr. Frazer Krohn, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, mate. Take it easy.